Hello, friends. It's just your buddy, Brandon, here. And before I begin with this conversation with Josh, I need to make a couple disclaimers. The first one is that this conversation touches on some challenging topics: sadness, death, suicide, and the feeling of not being okay. Now, Josh and I explore these subjects philosophically, but they are not merely philosophical for everyone. Acceptance of mortality is not the same as wanting to die, and darkness is not proof that you see life more clearly. If this conversation meets you somewhere painful, please don't wrestle with it alone. Reach out to someone you trust or to professional support where you live. The second thing I want to make a comment on is that Josh and I have been having conversations for a very long time. And so it's very easy for us to get really deep into some topics. And so, just to set a little bit of context for this conversation, that we can snap into it really easy. And so, it might seem really deep from the outsider, but this is just a lifelong conversation that Josh and I have decided to engage in. And the last final little thing here is that on a personal level, I find this episode hopeful, but I will say that I have a very high tolerance for dark topics, and not everyone does. And so, if you're someone who is particularly sensitive to these topics, ultimately, this might be an episode you want to skip or tread very lightly on. And finally, I have to end on a positive note here before we get into this episode, and that is that fundamentally, even though I like the darkness and I like engaging in these dark topics, I believe in the Tolkien idea that above all shadows lies the sun. Even on your darkest day, there's a spark to light the way. And I think there's always something hopeful in life. And I think life is ultimately a very beautiful, wonderful, lovely thing. And above every single shadow is something way more pure and beautiful. So, with all those disclaimers in place, please enjoy this episode. Please take it for what it is, a philosophical discussion. Joshua W. Bertolotti, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. You?
Fantastic, man. I'm going to read you. I'm going to make you very uncomfortable now, but I uh, I love your writing, and you're a fantastic writer. It's been a pleasure just watching you kind of develop as a writer, and you just have so many one-liners now that are awesome. And I've been collecting one-liners in this little brown book of mine, and I actually have one of yours in here, and I'd like to just bounce it off you. Being busy is not the same as being alive. And so one of the things I've struggled a lot with is going from someone who is too busy to even think to someone who has just a little bit of time to think. And it's been enjoying it. I've enjoyed it, but in some sense, to your point, I've felt a little bit less alive. And so I'm struggling with that question. So why don't you unpack that one for me?
I may have been writing about Pascal or something like that. I think a while back I did an episode How to Be Bored, and it had a lot of his writing in it. But I would say I want to take both sides of it in a way. I am mostly interested in people living intentional lives. So just an awareness, a bit of mindfulness on what it is. I don't see anything wrong with being busy or even working, whatever it may be, as long as it's intentional. And I think we all want that. There's this idea of choosing your regrets. Imagine yourself on your, deathbed. What are you going to regret? For some people, like I think of your boy David Goggins. His regret might be not doing whatever ultra marathon, this and that. So if that's where he's at, then do that, which is going to take a ton of time. You're going to be very busy training, etc. And then you have another person where it's like their regret is, you know, not being there for kids' birthdays and soccer games, etc. and stuff like that. So I think you have to slow down long enough to ponder some of those questions, to choose your particular regret. I think to live an intentional life, to be able to, downshift for at least periods. There's this polarity of action and contemplation. So it's like the contemplative life from a spiritual tradition. We're not just, necessarily spending 100% of every day in stillness, contemplative prayer. There is some sort of action. You think about Mother Teresa as an example. All of those sisters would wake up and they would pray in the morning for 2 hours. And then once they were done with that, which it was like 6 in the morning, they were out in the streets feeding the poor, caring for people that were dying. She was probably busy in most definitions of the word, but there was intention behind it. I'm assuming that she discerned and, thought a lot about what's a worthy pursuit of her time.
It's a great answer, and to be honest, it's very practical because where I find myself now is there's less noise in my current role. I switched jobs about 4 months ago, and it's been a learning curve. I went from having a lot of noise in my job, and there's still a lot of noise in my job, to slightly less so. But it's been interesting because for you to be strategic as a manager, you need those moments that you're talking about. And I didn't quite realize I was missing it. I always felt like I could stay busy and do a million things and be strategic. And you can to some degree, but you need time to just observe. It's one of the very cool things. It's like the classic thing of like you see the manager and he's kind of watching his team, and sometimes you're just doing that. Sometimes you're just observing. And there's a difference between a manager who just sits there and watches his team versus one who observes and is looking for things and is trying to understand the complexities of the interactions, of the relationships, of the technicalities of the role. And you have to do it with intention, but certainly I've quite enjoyed rediscovering or discovering, perhaps for the first time, this truth. There is a part of being a strategic manager that does have time, like you're saying, to reassess priorities, make sure that we're actually walking in the right direction as opposed to just walking in the right direction and cracking the whip. So I think it was a great kind of reminder. It was really timely for me to read that.
Nice. How much do you think about just like the clarity of values? Maybe it's just clarity of anything. Like, so you think of any sort of practical example that you're mentioning there? It's like in a team. It's like, what what is an effective team? I mean, you could sit and like ponder that and research and think about it for weeks, but typically, like in my experience, it's like ask any question. It's like, what is happiness? What's a happy life? What's an effective team? There's a response that pops up, and we might just accept that response. But then again, there almost needs to be, and I don't know what you would call this, but almost needs to be a bit of space for contemplation to sit with one of those questions for a couple weeks. Like, at least, it's like, well, what is an effective team? And it's like this, well, with this group right here, I mean, there's so much, but if we're so busy, which is always possible, like as human beings, it seems like it's very difficult to think deeply. It's like another level of like, yeah, we're thinking critically, but then there's like, kind of a notch below that where we are able to get still enough to actually, and I mean, you might just call it like think philosophically, whatever that means, but, think deeply, think about a particular topic for a prolonged period, not bouncing around from this to that to this, but, you know, living the questions or something like that is, like Rilke might put it.
Yeah, it's particularly hard in operations, which I am in. I mean, my role is a manager of operations, and in operations, it's basically all hell breaks loose in the morning, and it doesn't really end until night. And you have to, I don't want to make it seem like I'm sitting around all day. Like I'm still quite busy. Like my day is packed with operations and phone calls and emails and a lot, but I'm able to set aside time, and I do this on a weekly basis. I set aside time just to ask these questions. Are we heading in the right direction? Are we focused on the right things? And it's the wonderful, wonderful thing about strategy is that you don't need a lot of time. You just need time, and you just need regular time. And what I mean by that is if you're a super busy person, I don't even need to ask you to have a 30-minute strategy session every night. I need you to put aside like 15 minutes once a week, right? Like if you can just turn all your electronics off, lock yourself in a room for 15 minutes and say, am I pursuing the right things? And do that every week. Consistency is important. Like that's strategy to me. It's, and obviously business strategy, it gets more complicated. You need, but from a personal perspective, that's what it is. It's, are we pursuing the right things? Are we doing it in the right way? And let's just ponder that question for 15 minutes once a week and see what comes up.
Yeah. Here, let me bring up something that's, it's kinda weird. I don't think, too many of us think about this, but I've heard a number of people say it's like they go on a silent retreat or something like that for a week. Now people are doing, like, a dark retreat, and all this, which is awesome. I've never been, on something like that, and while my kids are still young and stuff like that, I probably won't be doing something like that, but maybe someday. But interestingly, a lot of people will say they sleep so much. I mean, just like they're so tired, but they're just not aware of it. Like they're carrying so much sleep debt. They're so busy, working so much and so sleep deprived, which is fine. Sometimes we're aware of it. But isn't that interesting where it's like, someone might be like carrying 24 hours of sleep debt for, whatever reason, it just like carries along. And it's like, man, you go and you take some sort of break, and it's like, you sleep for 3 days straight. Um, it's sad in a way, but it's weird. What do we need? And, like, that sounds, like, very soft and weak, It's like taking naps and stuff stuff like that. But maybe it's not. Well, maybe that would be the wisest thing to do. And that's the thing in terms of being busy, being bored, just stopping the doing. Like we have the being and doing, and generally, like we're good at one side of that. We have a natural like inclination. We're really good at the doing. This person's a doer. They close out tasks, like they get things done. But you need both of those. Like, we would all agree that, we need being, we need doing, we need action, we need contemplation, but just reflecting on, like, where might we be out of balance in some sort of way.
That's a beautiful spot to wrap up that quote, man. That was very well said. Very well said. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to throw another quote at you that you haven't heard before, probably.
Okay.
But like I said, I've been keeping this notebook and I put in quotes, and this is an interesting one. This is from a song called Ships in the Harbor, and it's been stuck in my head and my playlist for months at this point, probably like half a year. And let me read this to you and just get your thoughts on it. I tend to get lost in the stars. I waste every night wondering where we all are and how we must be leaving soon, as we should.
Wow. Um, who's that by? What's the band?
It's an individual guy. I think it's like Tommy Pines, I believe it is.
Okay.
Ships
Pretty
in the
pop
harbor.
pretty popular or no?
I don't think so.
No? Yeah, it is, but, like, it comes back to a little bit with me, and I mean, we've had a ton of conversations where it's like the intentional life, like, that sounds good to me, what he's talking about, the first piece of it. It's like, yeah, I kinda wanna live some sort of cosmic life. I wanna be aware of, this whole miraculous thing, but that's not everybody, and if that's not your thing that gets you jazzed up, then, find your thing. For somebody else, maybe it's, watching football in in some sort of it just depends, like, where do you feel most alive? So, yeah, I tend to give a lot of not great answers because it's like, it just depends, but it's worth reflecting of, like, what is that thing for you? What is that thing that's, like, really helps you to feel alive and grateful and, in harmony with this, with this thing that we call life.
Yeah, so this one has just been really challenging me because I read this and it gives me the woolies, right? The butterflies, whatever you want to call it, the pricklies. And, the first line, I tend to get lost in the stars. It's a beautiful, like just the thought today with screens and technology and people losing connections. Just how many people can say that they've gotten lost in the stars in the last month? I can't say that.
Yeah.
And if you ask me, would you enjoy that? 100% I would. Like I would love it, right? But then he says, I waste every night wondering where we all are. And it kind of gets back to that point that you were making is that, this there's room for both here. Like there's time to get lost in things. I quite like the perspective you gave of what is it that makes you get lost? That's really cool. Like what is it that just kind of disorients you? Is it a particular song? I mean, this song is doing it for me right now. Is it music? Is it the gym? Whatever it might be. But just the idea of like I waste every night wondering where we all are for this individual who is an artist. And I don't know him at all. I'm making assumptions, but it sounds like maybe he does a bit too much of that and he finds himself unproductive in life because he's always just lost in the awe of existence, which is a wonderful thing, but to an extreme it's not, right?
Yeah. Um, yeah, it is, I think, like, worth considering, like, what is that thing for you? Um, I don't necessarily read it, and I'm speculating as I hear it, and I haven't heard the whole song and stuff like that, but, I don't take it as any sort of negative thing. It's like I tend to get, lost in the stars. It's like, yeah, that's awesome. I'm speculating on that. But I bet for you, when you're doing, deadlifts or whatever it may be, you you're kinda lost in a good way. It's kind of some sort of that flow state type of stuff. Um, on my newsletter, I always send out some sort of, painting with it, and I think of, it's like Van Gogh's Starry Night, which is, it's kinda cliche and it just kinda looks like a kid did it or something like that. But if you really look at that and, like, look at the stars, it's just like how big they are and how much time he spent just in a time where there wasn't all this light pollution that we have today, where, like, he probably looked up and you could get a much clearer, much better view of the stars. And it's like he's putting in that painting of what it looked like to him. But I think we all have something where it's like, I tend to get lost in the stars. And I think it could be something as simple as, I mean, you just never know. It could be something as simple as a cup of coffee. I remember maybe 2 years ago or something, you did an episode about a cup of coffee or something like that. And it still sticks with me. It's like these things are available. These things are available. And back to the first thing that we were talking about, busyness in a way, like we can be hyper productive, we can get things done, we can do all sorts of amazing things. But there is a trade off to that in a way. Like you are, most people would say, like the person that's super productive isn't getting lost in the stars. And that's fine if that's, you have to reflect and think about how you want to do this thing. But, maybe it's worth at least making the space to reflect on that. Maybe I should get lost in the stars. Like maybe I should truly like appreciate my cup of coffee each morning or whatever it may be.
Very well said, man. I have to
It,
change
am,
the line. I tend to get lost in my squats.
uh, am I accurate there? Did you do an episode a couple years ago on cup of coffee?
Probably didn't title it "Cup of Coffee," but I could certainly see me spending probably several different episodes talking about just the ritual of making a cup of coffee and how, and even to this day, I genuinely enjoy just the process of grinding my own beans, buying fresh beans, grinding them myself, boiling the water, pouring the coffee, and making that first sip. And it's joy that's available to me every day. And so this stuff is just so fascinating to me because you think about this is one thing that I get to do every day that it's like 10 minutes of just bliss. Like I love it. I enjoy it. I really do. And then if you can design your life to be like more of that, you know, man,
Yeah.
that's the goal, right?
But think about that though. I love that line, like design your life. You're an engineer by training and stuff like that. Before you would design something, like what are the steps before that?
Well, the first step is something called preliminary design, where you you look at what's currently available. So I love it. It's a great question because if you're lost in life, maybe you should look at a church. Maybe you should look at stoicism. Maybe you shouldn't sit down in a room by yourself and try and think up a philosophy. Maybe you should just join one and look at what's out there and what might fit the bill.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like we tend to just jump into whatever it may be. It's like design your life. I'm going to design whatever it may be. I'm going to put this sort of practice, and we do this thing around New Year's and different things and birthdays and we whatever it may be, but there's steps before that. If you're building a house, you'd think about where, you'd think about the size, you'd think about 8 million other things before you even broke any sort of ground. If you were going to the grocery store, you think about, you might have a list. You would think about what you're going to make, what you need. You might look around and, in your cupboards, in your fridge. There's many, many things in life that we are very intentional about. But oftentimes when it comes to our lives, we have this thing of where we can just kind of go through it on autopilot. It's like, well, where are you going? I'll just kind of follow you. Well, what is it that you want? Well, I'll fall into mimetic desire and I'll just want what you want and all of this. And it's, that's an obstacle, but you'd have to think about, well, where do we get started? And to me, it's like you gotta like create that space to get started, that stillness to be like, "Mm, okay, you know what's what do I what do I want here? What do I, perennial questions and stuff like that. But you have to have time to ponder some of these like deeper questions about life.
I think it's a fantastic question is what do I want out of this life? And I think anything important to you, it's a good question. What do I want out of this life? What do I want out of this relationship? What do I want out of this relationship with my child? What do I want out of my career? What do where is the goal here? Where's the goalpost? And it can change, but what a great question just to sit with and just to ponder. What do I want out of this life? Like what would make you look back in 40 years and say, yeah, yeah, that was it.
Yeah. And it's gonna like spur off into all these other questions. Well, what is a good life? And then it's like, well, why? And you might do a bit of you don't necessarily have to do this, but you might do a little bit of research. Like, well, what did all these billions of people that have come before me say on said topic? Just to get, some outside perspective in it. But then you still have to think about it. And, well, what do I believe? What do I believe is a good life? You know?
I want to zone in on the last two lines, which are short on that same quote, because I don't want to gloss over it because I think it's, each line, it's any song, each line has so much potency into it, right? But the last two lines go, and how we must be leaving soon, as we should. So the line before that is, I waste every night wondering where we all are, and how we must be leaving soon, as we should.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't know in terms of what they mean by that. Honestly, what comes to mind when you hear that?
For me, I think of impermanence. For me, I think of just how mortal we are and how quick our lives go by. How we must be leaving soon, and then as we should. It's just the natural order of things. It's nature. It's to me, it's not clinging to life. To me, it's yeah, we're gonna die someday, and we should. And that man, you never hear that. Like you never hear someone say, "Yeah, we're all gonna die someday, and we gotta come to terms with that." But we also should die, right? Like
Yeah.
what a just crazy thing.
I get concerned a little bit in terms of where, if I hear one of my kids say something like that, I would, well, say more, and I would wonder in terms of, the artist of, well, what do you mean? Say more. Do you mean what you're talking about? Do you mean like philosophically? Are you, have you read Heraclitus? Is that what you're talking about? Or is it something different? Like, are you in the space that, Anthony Bourdain found himself in, or David Foster Wallace, or Van Gogh that we mentioned? Because we can get in that space very easily. We can get in this nihilistic, dark space of where the impermanence, I like the impermanence piece of like becoming every day. It's like, it's I'm new here today. This is a new day. I'm looking up at this, the stars like it's for the first time. I don't need to carry all this baggage with me of, whatever life and every mistake and every whatever it may be. Every day I get to like unburden myself and, walk forward. We all get that. Um, so it's like, as we should. I don't know. I don't know. That could be taken so many ways, but I'd have some follow-up questions. of, are we good? Are we good? It's like, because that's the as we should in a way, and the when and the where. Well, no, I think we all should wait and not so much worry about that. Montaigne said something like, "Yeah, I want death to find me like planting my cabbage." Just not worried. Not necessarily worried about that. That's outside of my control of when that comes and how that comes. That's like above my pay grade type of thing. But the as we should, now it's like there's some sort of judgment of like, well, who are you to say that we should, or who are you to say, like, I mean, there's lots of people in all sorts of traditions, philosophically, spiritually, where it's like they don't necessarily think that, this is the end. Yeah, it's like you're mortal, but there's uncertainty in terms of what happens after that. So yeah, I don't know. I'd want some, you know, humility about, the uncertainty of it. Maybe the next line is like, and who knows what comes next, or
It's a great point, and he doesn't necessarily imply that it's the end, right? He said we must be
yeah.
leaving soon. And so you could also view it from the perspective of, when we're finished here, we go somewhere else. And it's also worth noting, I highly recommend everyone should listen to the song Ships in the Harbor, but he kind of alternates that last line, as we should, verse to verse, with as we do. And so you could also simultaneously read that I waste every night wondering where we all are and how we must be leaving soon, as we do,
Mm,
which to me is a mirroring of kind of that stoic thing of as things happen is how we should wish for them to happen. It's not necessarily that we should get out of here quick, uh, but that we do. And so they're kind of two sides of the same coin.
yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
Let me run the course by you too, because um, I'm standing by the water. It's harder and harder. It's why I get sad when there's ships in the harbor. And so when you were talking about kind
Mm,
of this artist sadness, and it's almost like the artist is struggling with the fact that it's not that we're looking at these beautiful ships in the harbor and you're enjoying the beauty of it. It's more so that you're you're being saddened because the beauty is eventually going to leave. And I wonder how many people are in that situation, where you do have something, you are going through something beautiful, but there's this melancholy with it. And to be honest, I'm very worried that when I start having kids, I'm going to have that with my kids, because kids just grow up so fast, is what everyone says. And as much as you enjoy being present, there's got to be a melancholy with the fact that this isn't always going to be this way, and things are going to change. And which is a clinging, and it's not a particularly stoic thing, but I think it's something that the human soul struggles with.
yeah, it is interesting of, just an awareness piece, like an awareness of, the Stoics don't necessarily write about this, and, not everybody does, nor am I saying they should, but awareness of one's sadness. I did an episode one time with the author of, I think it's called How to Be Sad, and it's not something we think about, and it reminds me, as you're kinda, commenting on those lines of the impermanence thing, the the beauty that will not last, the ship going out to harbor that, may be gone for 6 months, and it has a loved one on it. I spent much of my adult life in the military, and many military members are, and I'm sure this is going on every day and all over the place now, of where, military servicemen and women are departing, leaving kids behind, and they're gone for 6, 12 months, etc., whatever it may be. But it'd be curious to know, like, if you could interview Epictetus, who's maybe the most Navy SEAL like stoic or something, it seems, where it's like, how do you think about sadness or whatever it may be? Because he's giving sometimes the remedy, here's how we might navigate said situation. But what about just the awareness of it? What if we're not even aware? I think it was Kierkegaard said something. I want to say, I think we spoke about it maybe a number of years ago, where it's like, what if everything is a misunderstanding? What if laughter is actually crying, et cetera, for example, which we probably know sometimes it's like, you go to a funeral and there's a bit of laughter, and naturally there can't, like, both of those things can exist. Maybe there's something humorous and you're remembering something, but maybe it's like sadness. Maybe it's really like the more authentic thing, and maybe what's, kind of going on is tears about it, but often we're just not necessarily aware of it.
Is the lovely thing about music is that songs songs capture eternal truths, but they don't always capture the value system that you hold. They meet you where your emotional state is. And what I mean by that is this artist. I don't know the full context, but it sounds like he's struggling with this. And there's a later verse where he talks about how his father passed away. Right, he lost his father, and he had to be moving on soon, as we do. And so he's struggling with these questions. And the wonderful thing about music is it meets you where you are. Like, it allows you to kind of feel this expression, and there's a depth to it, you know that it's not that philosophy doesn't give you that. It gives you tools and how to deal with this stuff, but sometimes I'm a big proponent of, sometimes what you need is just the right song. I don't talk about music enough probably on the podcast, but I do bring it in. I bring in songs, I bring in lyrics, but in my experience throughout my life, and maybe I know it's not just me, because music, everybody loves music, but I've always had a song. There's always been a song that's been just racking my brain. And this one's been racking, and often it's several songs at the same time for whatever reason, but it's just a way to process emotions and be understood. And I think that's another thing that's very interesting about music, is that you can be in a state that you feel like nobody around you understands you, and then you listen to a song and you think, I don't understand me either, but this artist does right now.
Mm,
and
yeah,
and that's, I like, who knows how many lives music saves. Honestly, it's such a wonderful thing that we have.
yeah. What about Jelly Roll? Have you heard some of his stuff?
I
Are you a
have.
fan at all?
I like his music. Yep.
How about NF?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, it seems like there is obviously space for the uplifting, focus on the, beautiful, brighter sides. But then you have some people like those two, and maybe the line that you brought up maybe fits in that category, where it's a bit on the suffering, it's a bit on the darker aspects, and unbelievably popular. Some of these, it's like, whether we connect the dots of why it connects with us or why it touches us in some sort of way, or whether or not we have even experienced something similar. Maybe there's just some sort of connection where it's like we connect with the vulnerability, like the honesty of like NF has some songs about his mom and stuff like that, and it gets into this like some of this dark stuff, and obviously like Jelly Roll addiction and all this stuff. And it's yeah, I don't know the answer, but I wonder like why it connects so well. Like, is it because so many of us are suffering ourselves? Is it, the authentic nature of it? It's yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. And Jelly Roll has that song, I Am Not Okay,
Yeah.
right? I think about the person that's really not okay. And how many times have you gotten asked, "Are you okay?" And you just say, "Yeah, I'm okay." Like, how many times have you in your life ever said, "I'm not okay"? Like, I don't think I've ever honestly said it, aside of singing along to Jelly Roll's song. And it's one of the things that I think music allows us to do is just to be honest, because we're resonating with the honesty of the artist. It allows us to be honest. Like, you sing that song, you're saying, "I'm not okay," and you might not be saying, "In this moment right now, I am not okay." What you might be saying is, "I'm a human being and I know what it feels like to not feel like I'm okay. Like, I've felt that before." And music can bring you back there really quick. And, for Jelly Roll to produce something like that and to get on stage and to just say those words, like, what an act of courage just to say, like, have you ever had anyone say those words to you? Have you ever had anyone say, "I am not okay"? Like,
Yeah.
it's not super common. It's so rare because it takes such courage to declare, "I am not okay."
Yeah, I love that song. And we've spoke so many times where it's like the polarity of things, where it's like I'm not okay, but at the same time, this opposite pole, I'm okay. And we're holding both of those. It's deeply connected with every wisdom tradition. There's a both and, there's a yin and yang, there's many of these things. Any sort of stoic exercise or practice, it's a polarity. You're doing this while at the same time holding this. You're taking a cosmic view from above while also holding the perspective of on the ground. Um, and that's so difficult to do, and nobody ever really teaches us things like this, but you come to it oftentimes through some sort of hard what do they say, like, hard-earned wisdom, which unfortunately, like, it comes through in some of those songs that we've been talking about. It's like, "Oh, man." That's like he didn't read about that. Like, he experienced that. It is coming through viscerally. Um which is it's a beautiful thing, um, but it's also like, man, do we all have to have, like, the hard-earned wisdom? I lost my older brother, a few years back to addiction, and it's, like, lots of hard-earned wisdom, of battling addictions, like, his whole life. Like, do we all have to experience it firsthand, or can we gain some sort of wisdom from, the missteps of others? Like, can we hear that and maybe just take their word for it and, let it help us navigate our way forward? It's always interesting.
Well, suffering is, the best thing it does is it allows you to connect with other people that are suffering, right? And, you know, when you lose someone close to you, you get that ability to have so much deeper empathy with other people who have lost other people. It reminds me. I texted you like a year or two ago. It's a while now, and I texted you this other lyric. I want to wear my heart on my sleeve, but be tough when I have to. And I had no idea what that meant. I had absolutely no idea what it meant. And I still don't, to be fair. But you said, leave it with me for a day and I'll get back to you. And you texted me back and you said something like, what if being tough and wearing your heart on the sleeve is the same thing? And I don't know if you remember that, but yeah, every time I hear that song, I think about that line, and I think it certainly speaks to what we're speaking to here with, I am not okay. Just having the courage to declare that sometimes. Yeah, you're declaring that you're not okay, but you're also having the courage to declare that you are not okay. So maybe being tough and wearing your heart on the sleeve can sometimes be the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Wrestling with any of these things, it just can be difficult. Like my heart goes out to anybody that is wrestling alone with any sort of thing of I'm not okay type of stuff where I don't know. I'm just a big proponent of when it comes to wrestling with some of these ideas and these perennial questions to have some sort of guide with you. Now, maybe you're fortunate and you have a wise parent or friend or uncle, but most of us don't. There's like wisdom is rare, but there are lots of like wise people that have come before us. If you can find it, that can help come to the a fuller picture of the thing. Well, yeah, it feels like you're not okay. And you can explore and sit with and all of this, the reasons why, but then you can also navigate your way forward. Like it's not an end point. This is a journey. You're on a quest, and there are many ways that we need to remind ourselves that even when we're feeling not okay, that we are okay. We're more than okay. We're absolutely, you know, wonderful, beautiful, many things to be grateful for. But how do we hold the whole picture of it? And that's where I think, philosophy, wisdom, all sorts of things can just help open our minds to a more complete picture, which is also like, bringing some nuance, bringing some complexity into this story because we are complex creatures, that's for sure.
It's a lovely, lovely place to wrap it up, man. Thanks for being here. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. And hopefully it's not another year before you're back on the Strong Stoic.
Well,
But
appreciate it, man. Good seeing
always a
you.
pleasure. Till next time, man.